April 17, 1945. Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. The air smells wrong. That's the first thing Dr. Marguerite Hoffman notices as she steps off the transport truck into the bright American sunlight. Wrong because it's clean. No sulfur dioxide burning her nostrils. No acrid ammonia making her eyes water before she even enters the laboratory. Just pine trees and red Georgia clay and something sweet she can't identify. Maybe honeysuckle growing wild along the fence line. She's 32 years old, a trained chemist with a doctorate from the University of Berlin, and she's been a prisoner of war for exactly 11 days. Her hands won't stop shaking. Not from fear, though there's plenty of that. They shake because, for the first time in nearly 4 years, they're not in constant pain. The chemical burns that have become her normal are finally beginning to heal in the clean air, and the sensation of healing skin itches and tingles in a way that makes her want to scream. She expects a cell. She expects interrogation. She expects, at minimum, the kind of brutal efficiency she's been taught to associate with wartime necessity. What she doesn't expect is the young American lieutenant who greets her in careful, textbook German, asking if she needs water, if the journey was too uncomfortable, if she requires medical attention. Marguerite stares at him, unable to formulate a response. In her experience, authority figures don't ask. They command. They demand. They dismiss. The lieutenant seems uncomfortable with her silence, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He's barely older than some of the students she taught before the war, before everything changed. Before the laboratory became a place of casual cruelty dressed up as patriotic sacrifice. She finally manages to shake her head. No water needed. No medical attention required. She's fine. She's always fine. That's what you say when supervisors ask about the burns, about the chronic cough, about the colleague who lost partial vision in her left eye after a splash of concentrated nitric acid. You're fine. You keep working. The fatherland needs munitions, and munitions need chemists, and chemists who complain about safety are defeatist cowards who don't deserve their positions. The lieutenant leads her across the compound, and Marguerite tries to memorize the layout like she's been trained. Guard towers, fencing, barracks buildings, but her attention keeps snagging on wrong details. Women walking freely between buildings, talking in clusters. A group playing volleyball in a cleared area, their laughter carrying across the warm afternoon air. Someone has planted flowers in wooden boxes outside one of the dormitories. Flowers in a prison camp. The cognitive dissonance makes her dizzy. They stop outside a low concrete building that looks newer than the others. The lieutenant opens the door, and the familiar smell of a laboratory hits her. Ethanol. Distilled water. The faint mineral tang of glassware. But again, it's wrong. Too clean. No underlying chemical stench that never quite leaves, no matter how much you scrub. The laboratory inside is smaller than what she's used to, but meticulously organized. Benches with proper ventilation hoods. Shelves of reagents in clearly labeled bottles. A fume cupboard that looks like it actually functions. Emergency equipment mounted on the walls with signs in both English and German. Marguerite's breath catches. She hasn't seen a properly equipped safety shower in years. The ones at her facility in Saxony had been cannibalized for parts in 1942, the metal needed for more important things. After that, if you spilled something on yourself, you ran outside and hoped the rain barrel had water in it. The lieutenant is speaking, explaining something about her work assignment, about how they need someone with her expertise to analyze captured German chemical samples, to help understand formulations and potential hazards. She hears maybe half of it. Her attention is fixed on the workbench in front of her, where someone has laid out a complete set of laboratory equipment and a lab coat. It's pristine white, the kind of white she hasn't seen since before the war. The kind of white that exists only in memories and propaganda photographs. She steps closer, moving without conscious thought, and sees the breast pocket. There's embroidery there. Neat, professional lettering in dark blue thread. Dr. M. Hoffman, her name. They embroidered her name. Her vision blurs. She blinks hard, trying to clear it, but the tears come anyway. Hot and unexpected and completely inappropriate. She's a German officer, a professional scientist, a woman who has maintained her composure through 4 years of war and deprivation and casual workplace horrors that would have broken lesser people. She doesn't cry, except she is crying. The lieutenant has stopped talking. She can feel him watching her, probably confused, maybe concerned. She should explain, should say something. But she can't speak because she's staring at this lab coat with her name on it. This symbol of professional respect she hasn't experienced in so long she'd forgotten it was possible. At her facility in Saxony, they'd issued her a gray smock in 1941. Just gray, no white available, cotton was needed elsewhere. By 1943, the smock was more stained than fabric. Brown from iron compounds, yellow from picric acid, a permanent purple splotch across the front from a manganese solution that had splashed during a rushed synthesis. She'd requested a replacement twice. Both times her supervisor had laughed, as if the request was somehow amusing, as if wanting to work in something that wasn't actively disintegrating from chemical exposure was a charming feminine vanity. She'd stopped asking. You learn not to ask. Next to the lab coat, there's a pair of gloves. Not the thin cloth wraps they'd given her in Saxony, the ones that provided essentially no protection and had to be replaced weekly as they fell apart. These are proper chemical-resistant gloves. Thick, durable. She picks one up with trembling hands, feeling the quality of the material. These would actually protect her. These would prevent the kind of burns that have scarred her hands, that wake her up at night when she accidentally rolls onto them in her sleep. There are safety goggles too, real ones, with proper seals and clear lenses. Not the makeshift cloth and glass contraptions they'd improvised in 1944 when the supply chain collapsed entirely. She remembers Helga. Sweet Helga, barely 24, brilliant with organic synthesis. Helga, who'd been working with a volatile benzene compound when the improvised goggles failed. The liquid had splashed up, catching her across the face. The screaming had lasted for hours. The supervisors had filed it as an acceptable workplace incident. Wartime casualties, necessary sacrifices. Helga had lost vision in both eyes. They'd sent her home to her parents with a medal for dedicated service and a pension that wouldn't cover half her medical needs. No one had suggested better safety equipment. No one had questioned the conditions. You didn't question. You worked. You sacrificed. You accepted that your government valued the munitions more than the people making them. The lieutenant is speaking again, and this time Marguerite forces herself to listen. He's explaining safety protocols. There's a briefing she needs to attend before she can begin work. A comprehensive briefing, he emphasizes. Safety regulations are taken very seriously. She almost laughs. It would be hysterical laughter, the kind that doesn't stop once it starts, so she swallows it down. Safety regulations, taken seriously, by her captors, by the enemy. An American officer appears in the doorway. Older, maybe 45, with gray at his temples and the bearing of someone who spent years in laboratories. He introduces himself as Captain Richardson, the facility's safety officer. His German is better than the lieutenant's, more natural. He's holding a clipboard and what appears to be a translated document. For the next 30 minutes, Captain Richardson walks her through safety procedures with a thoroughness that borders on obsessive. Every piece of emergency equipment, every protocol for handling hazardous materials, every evacuation route. He shows her the eye wash station, demonstrates how it works, makes her practice activating it herself. The water is clean and plentiful. It flows freely when she pulls the lever, no sputtering or rust or the dry rattle of empty pipes. She remembers the day Ingrid got sulfuric acid in her eyes. The panic as they'd searched for water, any water. The hand pump that had frozen in the winter cold. The desperate minutes while Ingrid screamed and they tried to melt snow to find something, anything to flush the acid away. Ingrid had survived. Barely. The scarring had been extensive. She'd been transferred to administrative duties, her career as a chemist over at 29. No one had been disciplined. No one had fixed the pump. They just filed another report about acceptable wartime casualties and moved on. Captain Richardson hands her the translated document. It's a safety manual, comprehensive, detailed. Written in clear German with diagrams and emergency procedures. She's supposed to read it, sign that she's read it, keep it for reference. Her hands shake as she takes it. The paper is good quality. Not the recycled gray pulp they'd been using in Germany since 1943, so thin you could barely write on it. This is real paper, white and sturdy. The kind of paper you waste on safety manuals when you actually care about safety, when you value the people doing the work. The captain is watching her carefully. "Are you all right, Dr. Hoffman?" The question, asked in German with genuine concern in his voice, breaks something inside her. No, she's not all right. She hasn't been all right in years, but she's never been allowed to not be all right. You don't get to fall apart when the fatherland needs you. You don't get to feel things when there's work to be done. You certainly don't get to question why your own government treats you with less care than it treats the laboratory equipment. Except the government hadn't treated the equipment well either. By 1944, half their glassware was cracked. They'd been reusing filter papers until they disintegrated. The fume hoods had stopped working, but they'd kept using the chemicals anyway because the production quotas didn't care about ventilation. She'd gone home every night smelling like a chemical factory. Her apartment had reeked of it. Her clothes, her hair, her skin. She'd stopped noticing after a while. You adapt. You normalize. You accept that this is just how things are now. The tears are flowing freely now and she can't stop them. Captain Richardson looks alarmed. He says something to the lieutenant who hurries out. Marguerite wants to apologize, to explain that she's fine. She's always fine. But the words won't come. She's staring at the lab coat with her name embroidered on the pocket, at the gloves that would actually protect her, at the safety manual printed in her language. She's thinking about Helga's screams, about Ingrid's ruined eyes, about the chronic cough that half the laboratory staff developed and no one ever treated, about the young chemist, she can't even remember her name now, who died in 1943 after prolonged exposure to mercury compounds. They'd held a brief memorial service and hired her replacement the same week. About the casual cruelty of supervisors who laughed at requests for basic safety equipment, who called them weak for wanting protection, who framed every complaint as a failure of patriotic duty. She'd believed them. That's the worst part. She'd believed that this was necessary. That sacrifice meant accepting burns and scars and permanent damage. That questioning the conditions meant questioning the war effort itself. She'd been loyal. She'd worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16 when they were behind quota. She'd breathed in fumes that burned her lungs. She'd gotten chemical burns that never quite healed right. She'd watched colleagues suffer and accepted it as the price of service. And now she's standing in an enemy prison camp, and her captors are giving her safety equipment. They're making her attend briefings. They're providing emergency eye wash stations with instructions in her own language. They're treating her like her safety matters, like her life has value beyond her productive capacity. The lieutenant returns with a woman in a nurse's uniform. She's kind, speaking gentle German, offering water and a chair. Marguerite sits because her legs won't hold her anymore. The nurse checks her pulse, asks questions about her health, whether she's injured, whether she needs anything. The kindness is unbearable. It highlights everything that was missing before, every casual cruelty she'd normalized, every indignity she'd accepted, every time she'd told herself that this was just how things had to be. She's not crying about the lab coat anymore. She's crying about 4 years of being treated as expendable, about a government that had demanded everything and protected nothing, about the realization that the enemy shows more concern for her well-being than her own leaders ever did. The nurse is patient, waiting for the storm to pass. Captain Richardson has stepped back, giving her space but not leaving. The lieutenant looks deeply uncomfortable, probably wondering what he's supposed to do with a sobbing German chemist. Eventually, the tears slow. Marguerite accepts the water the nurse offers, drinks it in small sips. It tastes clean. Of course it does. Everything here is clean, safe, organized. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. She's supposed to hate these people. They're the enemy. They've been bombing her country, destroying her cities, killing her countrymen. But they've given her a lab coat with her name on it. They've given her safety equipment. They've treated her with more professional dignity in one afternoon than she received in 4 years of loyal service. Captain Richardson speaks quietly. "We understand this is an adjustment, Dr. Hoffman. Take the time you need. When you're ready, we'll continue the briefing. There's no rush. No rush." When was the last time anyone told her there was no rush? Work was always urgent, quotas always pressing, production always behind schedule. You worked through the burns, through the coughs, through the exhaustion. You worked because stopping meant failure, and failure meant you weren't committed enough, weren't strong enough, weren't worthy of your position. She looks at the laboratory around her, properly ventilated, well-equipped, safe. This is what a laboratory should be. This is what she dreamed of when she was a student before the war, when science was about discovery and precision and careful methodology. Not about rushing through dangerous procedures with inadequate equipment because the quota demanded it. Not about accepting casualties as inevitable. The nurse helps her stand when she's ready. Captain Richardson suggests they postpone the rest of the briefing until tomorrow. Give her time to settle in, to adjust. The lieutenant will show her to her quarters. Marguerite nods, not trusting her voice yet. As they leave the laboratory, she looks back at the workbench. The white lab coat is still there, her name clearly visible even from the doorway, waiting for her, treating her like a professional who deserves proper equipment, like a person whose safety matters. The walk to the dormitory passes in a blur. The lieutenant is talking about meal times and recreation schedules and other administrative details that don't fully register. She's too busy processing, too busy confronting the reality that everything she'd accepted as necessary wartime conditions was actually just cruelty, just negligence dressed up as patriotic sacrifice. Her room, when they reach it, is small but clean. There's a bed with actual sheets, a small desk, a window with a view of pine trees. The lieutenant explains that she'll share the dormitory building with other female POWs, mostly nurses and administrative staff. There's a common area downstairs. Meals are served in the main dining hall. She can hear voices from somewhere below. Women talking, laughing. The normal sounds of people living, not just surviving. After the lieutenant leaves, Marguerite sits on the bed and stares at her hands. The burns are healing. The constant tremor is lessening. In a few weeks, they might look almost normal again. She thinks about going back. Eventually, the war will end. She'll return to Germany, to whatever remains of her country. She'll have to reconcile what she experienced here with what she experienced there. She'll have to explain to colleagues, if any survived, that the Americans treated her better than her own government. That enemy captors showed more concern for her safety than German supervisors. That she broke down crying over a lab coat because it represented a basic dignity she'd been denied for years. She doesn't know how to process that. Doesn't know what it means about everything she believed, everything she sacrificed for. The propaganda had promised that their suffering was noble, that their sacrifices were necessary, that the enemy was brutal and cruel and would show no mercy. But the enemy had given her safety goggles, had made her attend a briefing, had provided emergency equipment and clear instructions in her language, had treated her like her life mattered. She lies back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'll return to the laboratory. She'll put on the white coat with her name embroidered on the pocket. She'll wear proper gloves and safety goggles. She'll work in conditions that protect rather than harm her. And she'll have to live with the knowledge that it took becoming a prisoner of war to be treated like a human being. The irony is devastating. The truth is inescapable. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and grief and confusion, a small voice whispers a question she's not ready to fully acknowledge. If the enemy treats prisoners better than her government treated its own people, what does that say about which side was actually fighting for humanity? She's not ready to answer that question. Maybe she never will be. But lying in a clean bed in a Georgia POW camp, her hands finally beginning to heal, Dr. Marguerite Hoffman confronts a truth that will haunt her for the rest of her life. Sometimes the greatest cruelty isn't what enemies do to each other. It's what governments do to their own people in the name of loyalty and sacrifice and patriotic duty. And sometimes, the deepest wounds aren't the ones you can see on your skin. They're the ones that come from realizing you were betrayed by the very system you believed in. The white lab coat with her name on it hangs in the laboratory, waiting. A symbol of dignity she'd forgotten she deserved. A reminder that even in captivity, she's being treated with more humanity than she ever received while free. Tomorrow, she'll put it on. And every day after that, for however long this imprisonment lasts, she'll work in safety and dignity. She'll be protected and valued. And she'll carry the weight of knowing that it took losing the war to finally be treated like her life mattered. The Georgia sun sets outside her window, painting the pine trees gold and red. In the distance, she can hear the evening sounds of the camp settling in for the night. Women's voices, the clang of the dinner bell. The normal rhythms of life continuing, even here, even now. Marguerite closes her eyes and tries not to think about Helga, about Ingrid, about all the colleagues who suffered needlessly because safety was considered a luxury they couldn't afford. About the system that demanded everything and protected nothing. About the government that called it patriotism. She tries not to think about it, but she knows she'll never stop thinking about it. The white lab coat with her name embroidered on the pocket has shown her a truth she can never unsee. And that truth will follow her home, whenever home finally comes. if it ever does.